now to a big question. When is the Nigerian government likely to retake full control of the security situation in this country? Because let's face it, insecurity in Nigeria has become for the people of this country something of an epic historic catastrophe, a tragedy that's cost thousands of lives and tens of millions of dollars. It's difficult for even the governments to quantify how the people of Nigeria have been coping with the unimaginable horror of terrorism, abductions, ransom payments that have impoverished so many, and killings that have left them bereaved. How can those affected rebuild their lives? Will the cycle of terrorism, kidnappings, ransom payments, and death ever be broken? Well, this week the government of President Tinubu has been holding a major security and counter-terrorism summit here in Abuja, aimed at improving the response to the threat of insecurity in Nigeria as well as across West Africa. So, what's the assessment and what's the plan?
While terrorism troubles us greatly at the moment, we do well by remembering terrorism is not of Africa. We must tell this imported evil that wants to bend and break us, that it shall not succeed. Instead of making us bow, we shall banish it.
Our commitment extends to digital security, with the establishment of the National Cybersecurity Coordination Center to counter the use of our cyberspace by terrorists, but importantly, also adopting the advancement in technologies, with strict adherence to ethics and rights to anticipate and neutralize threats before they manifest. Additionally, I'm taking this opportunity to inform the world that we have resumed the prosecution of the Boko Haram and affiliated terrorist suspects detained in Kainji and other locations across the country.
Terrorists find a welcome home with deeply disillusioned, excluded, and desperate people. We must formulate responses that address these conditions, and in doing so, we must pay attention to our women and girls who bear the greatest impact of insecurity, often the victims of terrorism, who deserve our solidarity and who have a right to remedy and reparations, and also to our youth and future generations. Second, we need to work to rebuild the social contract across the region. The social contract, a bond between people and the authorities that govern them, has been frayed by decades of underinvestment, crises, and a lack of governance.
Well, for more on that Security and Counter-Terrorism Summit, I'm joined now on the line from here in Abuja by the security analyst and regional and international counter-terrorism expert, retired Group Captain Sadeeq Shehu. Group Captain Shehu, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I suppose you could say that the scope and scale of this summit is an important, poignant reminder of the human cost of insecurity, not just in Nigeria, but across the subcontinent. Because even as it is taking place, there are reports of more incidents of insecurity around the region.
Yes, unfortunately, this conference is coming at a time where Africa is rated as currently as the continent with the highest number of terrorist attacks and victims arising from terrorists. A recent research by the International Institute for Strategic Studies has shown that between January to June 2023, the African continent attacks due to terrorism have increased by 40%. Also, number of victims that arise from such incidents have risen by 22% compared to the same period in the previous year. So definitely Africa is facing the scourge of terrorism. So we can say this, this meeting called by Nigeria, United Nations and African Union is coming at a right time. But then we've been having so many meetings. Almost the problem is not having meetings, but it's implementing what has been discussed by the meetings, because each country has its own sovereignty. You might attend a meeting, but what was decided at the meeting now is up to individual country to go and decide whether to implement what has been decided or not. And basically, I would say that is the problem we're having in Africa. When you look at the sub-regions and you look at the international instruments that have been set up either by the United Nations or the African Union or ECOWAS. Many of the countries are behind in, while they do sign these documents, but carrying out actual implementation in their countries is lacking.
Very good point. And is it, I mean, you have a great knowledge of these things. Is it fair to say that the current insecurity in Nigeria, which is ravaging this country, will not be solved without also containing insecurity in the subcontinent?
Well, you see, terrorism, as we're talking of terrorism, is an international issue. You know, it crosses borders. So either the terrorists themselves, they operate from one country to another, or the instruments of terrorism, such as chemicals they use for IEDs, weapons such as small arms and light weapons, they cross border. So no matter how you look at it, you cannot remain within your country and say that you are fighting terrorism. The roots of the terrorism might flow from neighboring countries. So that is why always international collaboration in the fight against terrorism, either it is in blocking finances, in blocking the flow of weapons, or even in the checking of the movement of terrorists themselves, it needs international collaboration. No country can do it alone.
And of course, you've been watching the summit taking place in Abuja. You mentioned earlier that it would depend on other countries, of course, sovereign countries, to go back and implement the part of the agreement they agreed to implement. I mean, would you say, though, broadly speaking, that this counter-terrorism summit, which has just ended today in Abuja, has been, at least to some measure, a success? If so, what is that measure of success? What has it achieved?
Well, the measure of success we can see physically is the number of people that attended. Definitely the summit has received wide patronage from different stakeholders, whether it is at the global level, at the United Nations level, at the African Union level, at the regional level, including representation by several heads of states. So in that aspect, we can say it is a success. But I will still emphasize, it is not the meeting itself. We've had several, even Abuja is hosting probably the 4th or 5th summit on terrorism, on counterterrorism. So it is what happens after. That is how we can really measure the actual success. Like I said, when you look at the instruments that have been sent internationally to fight terrorism, whether it's at the United Nations, African Union level, or ECOWAS level, or even the other sub-regional groupings in Africa, there are many instruments. Many of them have been signed in principle. But after signing, do countries go back to implement those global best practices, those recommendations that have been made by these organs? That is where the failure is. But we hope this time around the countries will put their money where their mouth is and do what was agreed here in Abuja.
We're going to be watching to see if that happens. You mentioned putting their monies where their mouth is. I mean, did you detect, at least on the face of it, a sense of urgency from this summit? Because it requires, as you correctly pointed out, not just collective action, but adequate funding and mobilization.
Exactly. Here I come to the point, with due respect, our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has called for the establishment of a regional center. With due respect, being conversant with the issue of terrorism in Africa, I would like to say that actually it is not even the problem of centers that we have. We already have so many centers. If you are talking about regional center, we already have the African Center for the Study and Research on Terrorism. That is the ACRST that is based in Algeria. This is an African Union organ. It was set up with the agreement of all African countries. So I think from what I find on my own research is that this center is seriously lacking from human and financial capacity. So instead of talking of setting up another center, I think we have a regional center which stands for all the African countries. What the African countries, including Nigeria and all the head of states, to do is to empower that center to become a one-stop shop on issues of counterterrorism. Apart from the center in Algeria, we have another center for security studies based in Ethiopia. We have the African Center for Strategic Studies. We have the Horn of Africa Terrorism and Terrorism Project in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. Even in Nigeria here, we have our counterterrorism center that is based here in Abuja. So the issue, like I said, is not even additional center. It's trying, even though, again, I heard in the president's speech, he again came back and said that, we should strengthen existing mechanisms like CISA, like the center in Algeria. So I think the message came, kind of multiple, but the issue is not a new center. I do not think it's a new center that we need. What we need, like the president said later on in his speech, is to improve and empower these existing centers that are already there. And it is a matter of operational capacity, financial capacity, and human resources. That is what we need to be doing, not additional center.
And of course, going beyond that, this obviously is a counter-terrorism summit that's aimed at improving West Africa's response to the threats from Islamist militant groups. What is the solution that is being proposed in countries that are worst affected by the violence, such as Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, the Sahel region, none of which have sent delegations to the summit because they're all under military rule, and that has strained relations with other countries in the region, such as Nigeria?
A very valid observation. In fact, we have to go to the root cause. Why do we see Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso kind of revolting against economic community of West African states? One of their reasons, whether real or perceived, is that while they were facing terrorism in their countries, they saw very little support from ECOWAS. Now, we may debate on that, but that is one of their grudges against the sub-region. So even now that they didn't come, I think we know over the Niger expulsion issue and the threat to occupy the country, it is something I know the ECOWAS is working assiduously to see that rupture, if it is an initial mistake that was made, now we are trying to find a way to bring those people back in the country, because it is to everybody's interest to have a sub-region or a region that is united. I just finished saying that terrorism is an international scourge. It moves from border to border. So any country that does not come together to solve the problem and thinks that it can face the problem, no matter the resources it has, and unfortunately most of the countries, even Nigeria, cannot claim to have all the resources to face the scourge as we are seeing. So unity and cooperation among the regional members is what we are going. But then again, we have to emphasize the point that part of the revolt that these countries are doing was that while they were facing terrorism in their countries, they saw very little effort in terms of either it is sending troops, or it is sending money, or it is sending equipment. They didn't see ECOWAS doing anything. So it comes back to what I am saying. There's the ECOWAS a protocol on counterterrorism. There's a common position by the ECOWAS states. There is so many other, in fact, ECOWAS among the regional groupings, I think it is the one that is more forward-coming in having instruments. But the instruments stop at signing, at meetings, at reiteration, but in actual ground, nobody wants to put his money into supporting. We talk, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu spoke about standby African force. Not even at the West African. It is very difficult now if West Africa will be able to raise a trouble like we saw during ECOMOG, which of course we have to remember Nigeria shouldered almost 90%. Now with economic crisis, we do not see countries wanting to put their money, especially if the problem is not in their own country. With respect, even if we go higher up than ECOWAS, if we go with the African Union, I have served with African Union forces, I have been part of some of their peacekeeping missions. The unfortunate thing, the shameful thing is that African Union as a body cannot launch any operation without the support of extra-African countries like European Union, like United Nations. So these are issues. I come back to the point that you have to put your money where your mouth is. It is not about meetings. It is not about communiques. It is actually going back and putting money and putting resources to ensure that Africa can, up to a certain extent, confront its own problem and provide solutions to them.
That's a very important point you make there, and I'm glad that you brought it up. But you are, of course, an international counter-terrorism expert, but beyond that, you are very knowledgeable about the security situation in Nigeria. Beyond this summit, what is your assessment of what the Nigerian government is doing to try and get a handle of security in this country? I understand the speed and scale of the response to incidents of insecurity has increased. Is that your assessment?
We can say there has been some improvement, but I am not one that will say we are out of the woods yet, or that we have reached, a stage where we can do chest thumping and then congratulate the government. As citizens, as responsible citizens, we have to continue keeping the government on its toes. Where it is getting things right, we applaud them. Where they are getting things wrong, but still there's a problem of insecurity in Nigeria. For the security analysts like myself, what concerns you is how many people are being killed, how many people are being kidnapped, how many attacks are we registering, how many people are being displaced from where they are, how many people are leaving their villages, are not farming, how many areas are under the control of either bandits or terrorists. For us, these are the critical indices that we look at, and it is an ongoing situation. We measure them month by month, week by week, compare them to past year, comparing the previous 2 years, and it is only in that aspect that we can say there is progress. Yes, again, progress is variegated. Today you may have a progress, tomorrow you will have a reversal. So what we want the government to continue doing is to continue those things that are going right, to continue contacting people even from outside the government, so that you get multiplicity. Different people have different solutions. Sometimes you have to listen to different people before you arrive at what is the best solution for yourself. So that is just what we have to keep telling the government, but we have not reached the stage of body thumping because the figures are still there. We still have students under attack. We still have people being attacked in villages, whether it is in the northwest, whether it is in the north central. We still have elements of Boko Haram that are terrorizing either actual attacks. Of course, we have to agree, even from the last government, the number of attacks in the northeast have greatly reduced. But that has not stopped to say that Boko Haram has been defeated. That has not stopped, explosive ordinances exploding in areas as people are going back to farms. So some people are still not back in their areas of normal livelihood. So these are issues that government must continue to, and the government should also be keeping its own record. Apart from public and media campaign, the government should keep its record. What were the records last month, January? What was the record for February? It is only in that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu can really put a pulse. Is he achieving an improvement or not? And where you see reversals, then you call the people that are responsible and ask them.
And on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed for this very illuminating interview. Retired Group Captain Sadeeq Shehu is a security analyst and a regional and international counter-terrorism expert, and he was talking to me there on the line from here in Abuja. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.